So Xbox Game Pass this October continues to heat up in the fall. We have 11 more games the rest of this month, and we'll also take a quick look at November titles. I'm Sonny, your host here on Xbox Central, and one of the most anticipated titles finally launches in Plague Tale Requiem. This is the sequel to the game Plague Tale Innocence, and in this game the journey of Hugo and his curse alongside his big sister continue as they fight to get a cure. Now the sequel does bring a lot more to the table with its gameplay this time. As you progress, you can decide how to move forward. You can have Hugo take out guards with his rats, or you can try some stealth takedowns with Amnesia, or one of your new friends can help in on the action. But one thing that absolutely sticks out with Requiem has to be the next gen visuals, really pushing Unreal Engine to showcase what the Xbox Series X and S can do. There's only one caveat though, that the game is reportedly at 30 FPS. Keep that in mind. Now if you guys haven't played the previous game, you'll be caught up. You'll be able to jump in feet first and enjoy one of the better games to release this year in 2022, and you'll also get about 15 to 20 hours that'll take to complete the story. And of course you'll be enjoying it on Game Pass across Xbox Series X and S, cloud, and PC. So we kick off the second half of October with even more horror titles to fill Game Pass with the Amnesia Collection. This collection includes The Dark Descent, A Machine for Pigs, and the expansion Justine. Now these are first-person horror adventures where you must survive some pretty brutal nightmarish settings in the hopes of retrieving your memories. What makes these Amnesia titles a bit different from other horror titles, it's not really giving you kind of those weak spooky vibes, but more like a dark oppressive atmosphere that really keeps you at the edge of your seat. Now with the games being first person, your view is going to be very limited, and you have to try to stay in the light across the games or your characters go insane and you lose. Filled with amnesia and you trying to piece it all together, mixed in with the psychological horrors and the horrific monsters you'll be encountering, you have a recipe for one of the classics of the past decades to drop with this collection. Then we have the more recent Amnesia Rebirth. This is the newest in the series that brings some new elements to surviving the darkness with more light sources, a new story, and an adventure mode that actually brings a little less scary experience for those who deem the game a little bit too much. Now all these Amnesia games are one of the most well-loved horror titles to have released in the past, decade. If you guys are into first-person narrative-based horror titles with lots of puzzles, exploring your environments, and dealing with the occasional horrifying creatures, the Amnesia titles are some of the best you can experience this Halloween. Amnesia Collection and Amnesia Rebirth drop on October 20th across consoles, cloud, and PC. And so from those same creators of the Amnesia titles, Game Pass is actually delivering on the game SOMA, only this is a sci-fi horror game set below the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. With food about to run out, your radio's dead, you're left to figure out how to deal with this seemingly bizarre station where the people have lost their minds, there's really twisted creatures, and the robots all think they're humans with human consciousness, which makes for an interesting plot twist because there's times you're gonna have to make decisions to pull the plug on those robots. The game really has been heralded since it released back in 2015 as a brilliant story-based horror game with a pretty unique setting and atmosphere. This game drops on Game Pass on October 20th on consoles, cloud, and PC. So from the jump, Vampire Survivors isn't gonna blow you away with its visuals, but believe it or not, this game has taken off the past 11 months with 120,000 overwhelmingly positive user reviews, and the reason being, this is a simple yet addicting action roguelike game where you survive as long as you can while the gameplay remains relatively simple. You'll be killing enemies in big droves, collecting experience, upgrading your skills and abilities, and really the simplicity of your abilities auto-firing while you're upgrading really gives Vampire Survivors this satisfying gameplay loop and why it's gotten so popular despite not looking like much on the outside. This hits Game Pass on October 20th for PC. In one of the more unique games to drop in recent times, Phantom Abyss is a game about getting your Indiana Jones on as you trek through procedurally generated temples to get to the sacred relic at the end. But guys, there is a big twist to this game. You only get one attempt at each temple, and you have to go through a myriad of hidden traps, some really serious platforming, and you have to avoid some very dangerous guardians all through some very branching paths along the way. Now one key feature is you're going to see phantoms who were other players who've run this temple before and they have failed in the past. You can actually use them as a guide, but if you die, you might actually be a phantom for a future player to learn from your mistakes. It's a really super cool game, one I've gotten to play and have had a blast with in the past, and this is certainly going to be a hidden gem on Game Pass going forward as it launches on October 20th on Xbox Series X and S, cloud, and PC. So finally guys, Persona 5 is going to arrive on October 21st. Here you play as a high school student in Tokyo by day, but by night you're wearing the mysterious mask of the Phantom Thief as you try to save save the world. Now this game has a lot of things happening. During the day you'll do your daily activities and routine, things like getting a job to earn money, doing your daily quests, but when you're donning the mask at night, you're engaging in a pretty wild story of stopping corrupt people with a pretty well done turn-based combat system. There's also a very deep story with multiple alternate endings depending on your choices, and with the game being the Royal Edition, you're getting the base game plus 40 items of previously released DLC, more stories, and even more places to explore. And as I've said before, if you guys are new to JRPGs, this is a great one to start with, even without playing the previous Persona games, and this ends up being one of the best games to drop on Game Pass this year. Expect to see Persona 5 Royal on consoles, cloud, and PC. Staying true to having more horror games this October, we have the game Signalis. Here you play as Esther, a humanoid replica who just woke up without memories of her past. Now, this game set in a dystopian future, features full anime-inspired visuals, top-down gameplay. So far, though, the aesthetics and mood of this title are pretty dark. If you guys have ever played the classic horror games from decades ago, I really think you're going to be familiar and at home with this one. Signalis drops on October 27th on consoles, cloud, and PC. So Gunfire Reborn might be the most action-packed game to drop this second half of October, a title that brings different elements all into one, from the roguelike genre, RPG, and first-person shooter, all in this one big mashup of procedurally generated levels, a variety of different weapons every single playthrough. The fast-paced gameplay can really be enjoyed as well solo, or can be done with you and 3 other players. Expect to see Gunfire Reborn on October 27th on consoles, cloud, and PC. So we have the game Frog Detective: The Entire Mystery. This is a collection of 3 games where your job's to find clues and question suspects. The game's really lighthearted. It's very quick, as the runtime of some of these are just a few hours, in some cases just 1 hour, and each game has different mysteries to solve. This collection drops on October 27th on PC. So The Legend of Tianding is an action-adventure side-scroller based on real-life stories of a vigilante who's wanted by the authorities for robbing from the rich and then feeding the poor. This was back in early 20th century, and you'll be fighting for justice in the streets with your deadly kung fu style. Now this is a full-on beat-em-up title. You'll be stringing fighting moves and combos together. You'll be dodging attacks left and right, all in this perfect blend of button mashing with smooth animation and gameplay, while also unlocking new kung fu moves throughout the game that are more powerful. Mixed with this action-packed gameplay and the comic book art style, I really feel like you guys should give The Legend of Tianding a shot when it drops on October 31st. With that, let's go ahead now and take a shift and look at November Game Pass games, starting with Ghost Song. This is a day 1 Game Pass release and the newest Metroidvania from Humble Games, where you play as a person who was in slumber for a long time, has awakened now on a mysterious and ancient planet. As with most Metroidvanias, you're going to be exploring some really deep and winding caves, battling super strange and powerful creatures, and discovering hidden areas while acquiring new weapons and abilities that range from things like big melee hammers to blasters and guns. There's really a lot happening with this indie title, and it should be a good one when it drops on November 3rd. So yet in another day 1 Game Pass release, we have Football Manager 2023. If you guys aren't familiar with this series, it's a game about managing a soccer/football team in every single aspect that you can imagine, from signing and scouting players to your team, to the coaches that you choose, to even the strategy of each game, as well as even very little things like the uniforms and a lot more. This year's iteration with Football Manager 2023 brings an improved squad planner, better interactions with player agents, changes to the AI manager, defense tactics have also been improved, and the biggest change is a better engine showcasing the games themselves with improved visuals and just a better overall experience. Football Manager 2023 lands on Game Pass on November 8th. And so the new games just keep on rolling. We have another new game here in Pentiment. This is brought to you by Obsidian Entertainment. This is the makers of Fallout New Vegas and Outer Worlds. With this game, it's a narrative-based title that really focuses very heavy on storytelling from the early 16th century Germany, where you play as an artist who's been caught up in a series of murders spanning 25 years. Your job will be to expose these killers. The cool thing is, over time in those 25 years, you're going to see a lot of changes around you happen. Main characters start to grow older, and the decisions that you make as you progress will definitely have an effect as you try to solve a pretty big conspiracy. Pentiment lands on Game Pass on November 15th. In what might be the most action-packed day 1 Game Pass release this November, we have Gungrave G.O.R.E. Here you're put into the role of a killing machine who pretty much just kills everything and everyone without any mercy. Featuring a stylized art style, third-person action gameplay, the game weaves close-range martial arts with an incredible amount of gun gunplay where it's pretty much just raining bullets on your enemies. And finally, the game has about 12 hours worth of gameplay in the story mode. Gungrave G.O.R.E hits Game Pass on November 22nd. Now, a game that's seen a couple of delays but hopefully will now see its final launch in November, we have Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, and this could potentially be the best co-op game to drop this year. Warhammer 40,000 Darktide is from the developers of the award-winning franchise Vermintide. This title features 4-player co-op action that has you fighting hordes of enemies, upgrading your gear, and choosing the skill set you enjoy the most. On top of all that, Darktide will be featuring a new evolved combat that's different from the previous game. If you guys are familiar with games like Back 4 Blood or Left 4 Dead, only this game's in a fantasy setting and a slightly more deep than those. I really think Warhammer Darktide will be a fun one for you, and so far this is my personal most anticipated game this November. It does land on Game Pass on the 30th. With that, we have games leaving Game Pass on October 31st. I'm going to go ahead and throw that list up on the screen so you guys can check that out. And if you guys want a full breakdown of the biggest games coming to Game Pass in the months ahead, some big AAA games, check out the video on the screen.